So the big issue on Monday was this countdown program on MSNBC with Richard Wolff making some very interesting statements talking about White House sources. Now, who could this be? Could it be Rombozo Emanuel? Could it be Axelrod? Could it be Brennan, the terror advisor to Obama? I don't know. It sounded more like a political advisor. Could have been Axelrod or Rahm Emanuel. Saying, in effect, there may be a conspiracy, there may be people in the intelligence community with an alternative agenda, and that it may have been intentional. And naturally, the first thing that I added was, your estimates of the reasons for this are amateurish. It's not a turf war, and it's not the desire to make Obama look bad in just sort of partisan political terms, the sort of Rush Limbaugh stuff that you'd expect. You're dealing here with the rogue network, boys. This is the invisible government, the secret government, the shadow government, the parallel government, the deep state, the Wall Street, the Eastern establishment, this town, it's sometimes called here in Washington, the street, whatever. They don't do things at that level unless they really have to, and when they do it, it's not to embarrass people, it's to eliminate them. The reason, therefore, is geopolitics, two sides, right? One is totalitarianism on the home front. Let's have a new wave of Islamophobic hysteria being stoked by these radio lunatics, but the leading edge then is to impose more totalitarian controls, body scans, X-ray machines, questioning the El Al method, right? Let's go and imitate this authoritarian to totalitarian Israeli state, garrison state, and let's bring that over here to the United States. Great idea, boys, in the rogue network. And the other side, of course, is you've got to whip up Islamophobic hysteria to back up the idea that you're going to be at war with Pakistan sooner than you think, and maybe openly, and you're going to be going massively into Yemen, and they may even go back to Somalia. God, you'd think they would have learned the lesson, right, that Somalis have real guns with real bullets, as one congressman put it at the time, warning at the end of the Bush regime there in 1992, the original one, not to do it. So the reasons are domestic totalitarianism and, above all, world geopolitics and world domination. The reason is that the measures needed by bankrupt and degenerate Anglo-American imperialism are so odious in the eyes of the American people that they cannot be avowed. You can't come out and say, we want to go to Yemen and these other countries or Sudan or whatever it is because we're interested in blocking peaceful economic development as proposed by China, that we're out of it economically, we cannot compete, and therefore we propose to block this with military means. You can't argue this in public. It doesn't work, and therefore you've got to have Al-Qaeda and Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula and Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. Remember, the original Al-Qaeda founded by Robert Gates of the CIA back in 81, 82, that's the Arab Legion to fight the Soviets in Afghanistan. Then we had Al-Qaeda in Iraq emerging as if by magic in 2004, I guess it was, when they really needed it. Stanley McChrystal was the guy who apparently got Zarqawi out of the Ansar enclave and got him to come out and make a declaration of fealty to bin Laden just when the U.S. propaganda mill needed it, and then, of course, go on to use that as a counter-gang to get a civil war going inside Iraq. And now we've got the foundation of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. And this is being done openly by the U.S. in the eyes of the world. They're saying, oh, we're humanitarians. Great. This is a good example of how Obama is different. Obama says, look, I'm a humanitarian. Under humanitarian cover, I'm going to empty out Guantanamo. I'm going to send all those Yemeni fighters back to Yemen. Then, of course, a jailbreak, and we've already had one big jailbreak in Yemen this past year. Then all those guys can then go out and start Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, and they can beef up that civil war. Remember, the goal of that is that you've got the Shiite Houthi rebels in the north of Yemen who are fighting against the central government, and the Saudi Sunnis are coming in on the side of the central government to fight those Shiite Houthis in North Yemen, and you've also got something really left over from communism, I suppose you'd have to say. South Yemen, Aden, right? This was a big deal going back to the 1960s. There used to be South Yemen with Aden as its capital, and this was a group of people who were pro-Soviet at the time. Anyway, they're radically different from the from the northern ones, and they're not. They didn't used to be Islamic fundamentalists. They're more like communist revolutionaries. At least that's what they talked like several decades ago. So the idea, of course, is then to break that up and use that as a means to obviously play Saudi Arabia against Iran. Since the Saudis would be supporting the central government, the Iranians would be supporting the Houthi rebels. And into that, then the U.S. could come with a third force, as done in Iraq already, the al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. That third force could act as a provocateur force to get the civil war going in grand style, promote the breakup of Yemen. Remember, the operative policy is now microstates and mini-states. Microstates and mini-states. In Pakistan, it's called Pashtunistan, Baluchistan, Punjab, and Sindh, and we've just gone through Yemen. I would point out anybody proposing secessionism, also known as treason, here in the United States, secessionism is the essence of anarchy and the essence of treason. That's the Wall Street policy. That's microstates and mini-states. And you want to bring that in here too? Not very wise. Secessionism is the essence of the New World Order. Secessionism is the nerve and fist of the New World Order. Everywhere in the world, all the national states have got to be broken up. Why? Because powerful, successful states can fight bankers and defeat them. Bankers have got to be resisted. Weak states, balkanized states, microstates and mini-states are easy prey for bankers and also for things like ExxonMobil, Blackwater, Halliburton, and the rest of them. Right? So it's time for some clear thinking on some of these important issues. Now, where does Obama come in? He is confronted by the fact that there's this network that regards him as a puppet, but as an expendable puppet, and they're going to do things that are politically very, very damaging to him. In other words, sabotaging the obvious mechanisms that would have rounded up the Detroit Flying Patsy of Christmas Day. Well, that sabotage has been a tremendous political embarrassment to Obama. So that is what we saw bubbling to the surface on Monday evening with this report from Richard Wolff. Now, no illusions about this, and I'm the last one to have them. When it came to Obama, I wrote the book, and nobody should forget it, starting 2 years ago when the left libs were swooning with their Kool-Aid and their lemming behavior. However, you've got to remember that there is always an inherent tension between the powers of the presidency and the needs of the rogue network. A president who decides to, if he has the moral and intellectual force to do it, can get up any day and inflict grievous damage on that rogue network, any day. The problem is, of course, that these people tend to be selected because of their character weaknesses, their complexes, their neuroses, right? One is a sex maniac, one is a borderline psychotic, one has Alzheimer's, and on and on and on, so that they're incapable of doing these things. Now, the big question, we have two examples, Kennedy, Carter. Both of these are people who came in more or less as puppets. Kennedy is the example of the puppet who learns something and breaks free from puppet status, more or less in the way that I've just described. And for Kennedy, the key moment there is the Bay of Pigs. Kennedy comes into office. Alan Dulles is there from the CIA, rogue network operative. Richard Bissell, head of the clandestine services. Cable, deputy director. And they say, hey, Kennedy, we've got this wonderful plan to invade Cuba. There'll be an insurrection. Castro will be overthrown. You should sign on. Kennedy says, fine, you're the experts. I'll do it. It doesn't work. They demand airstrikes. They're going to get him embroiled with the Soviets, God knows. And Kennedy says, no. And then at that point he says, I'll take responsibility. But he knows then, he has been shown that these people are incompetent, they're criminals, they're treacherous, and they don't care about him. They don't care about the country. So he then fires Alan Dulles, fires Richard Bissell of the clandestine services, and fires Cable, the brother then of the Dallas police chief. But you get the idea. That was the moment that might have occurred if the moral characteristics had been there. Unfortunately, they weren't there. But we'll have more to say about this in a couple of minutes.